Okay, so here's this pit back brake. I buy these from eBay and Amazon, and they come from China is the only bad thing. But I like how they're a dual piston and they're gold, kind of like the Honda front shocks, like on a dirt bike, or bronze, whatever you want to call it. So this is what I've been making right here. Is this rear is just a scrap piece of like 1/4-inch flat stock. But I cut this out so it sets smooth. I still got to grind that corner down a little bit, but then I got to set the caliper on the rotor. Right there, as you can see, I mounted that pipe right in front of the rotor, so I'll have a good mounting spot for this caliper mount that I'm making. So what I got to do is cut these bolts off flush as I can get them. So I'm going to go ahead and mark them, and then put them in a vise and cut them real quick, and then I can finish doing whatever I have to do to make this fit that piece of square tubing right there. So once I get this fitted, I'll get it tacked in place, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, now I've started doing the steering arm. Took some 1/2-inch rod stock, and then I actually used this was off the old steering arm, and you can see I welded a collar, another piece of 1/2-inch inside diameter pipe, and that just keeps the steering rod from being able to go, you know, up towards the driver. And then when we put our pieces of triangle 1-inch square tubing right here, there'll be another piece of that 1/2-inch inside diameter pipe welded on at the point. So that'll keep the steering wheel from going the opposite way, because right now, you know, you can push it in. And then up under, as you can see, we have the steering arm. So all the steering mechanisms will, the tie rod ends and stuff will be under the go-kart, giving it a lot cleaner look than them being right there in the floor. So now I can move my gas pedal and brake pedal and everything up towards the front of the go-kart. So now I'm just going to slide these pipes where they need to be, these square tubing, and weld them into place, and then put my V on. Okay, so I got that steering rod welded on. So what I need to do is finish cutting the piece of square tubing that's in that the vise, and then I'm making kind of an A-frame coming up off of these pieces of square tubing there and there that'll come up and meet in the middle, and I'm going to cut a little indentation out, which a sleeve kind of like this will be welded onto, and this will be slid onto it, and then the A's will be welded, the V will be welded down there. You'll see once I get it done. So let me cut this other piece of metal and get all that figured out, and then we can put that on. And last thing we need is a 3 1/4 like washer or piece of metal to weld onto the steering arm, so I can bolt this on. Okay, so I had one of my buddies cut this out with a plasma cutter. This is 3 1/4, which matches the quick release hub on the car steering wheel. So what I'm going to do now is take my flap disc and smooth this out, because it's real hard to cut. I mean, it's almost impossible to cut a perfectly smooth line with a plasma cutter, especially a circle. So got my flap disc loaded up on my angle grinder, and I'm just going to go around this and make it smooth. I've already started on it, so you can see that I've already got this side really smooth. So I'm going to work my way around it, and then we can finish the steering. Now that's the triangle that's going to support the top of the steering wheel, or the steering arm. I just need to put a slant cut on that tip so it meets that pipe, so it meets that steering arm, and then I can weld the little sleeve that I'd cut, which is right here, onto that V right there, and so it'll slide right on that arm, and then I can weld the V to those 2 braces. So once I get this grinded, we can get the steering finished up. Okay, so I got all those holes drilled for the hub to bolt up to this plate, and I drilled a 1/2-inch hole in the center, because that's what the rod is. The steering rod's a 1/2-inch outside diameter solid rod. So now we can slide this on and put a bead all the way around it. But before we slide this on, we need to slide on our little collars that we had made. We need to slide 2 of these on. So I'm going to get to finish assembling the actual steering arm, and then we can cut that V how we need it. Okay, now I got that whole steering arm support all made up. Just did some kind of crappy welds on it. I had a little gap to fill right there, but she is done and cooling off. So last I will sand this up a little higher, so when it meets the 1-inch square tubing on the floor right there, you know, it'll be a good clean surface. And you can see where I've marked where I'm going to sand on each side. So I'm going to get that all prepped, and then I'm going to run my 1/2-inch drill bit through this again and maybe file it some so that 1/2-inch rod slides in it really easy, because you know, once you weld it, it can deform the hole in there. I left the rod in it for a little while and I got it pulled out now. So once this cools down all the way, like I said, I'll run that 1/2-inch drill bit back through it to clean it up, and then maybe even, like I said, run a file down through it. Okay, now we got this all welded on there. Went ahead and put the steering wheel hub on and made sure the steering wheel was straight, as well as the end that'll hook to the tie rods. The only thing I got left to do on the steering now is take the little knuckles off that those steering arms are on, and modify them to work with the new steering setup, since the steering's running under the cart instead of, you know, right here in the foot area. Once I modify those knuckles, all I gotta do is cut that ear off, and then weld some flat stock that'll reach out to where my tie rod ends will be. So if we look at this tire, of course the tire won't be right up against it. I'm just using this for reference. You know, like I said, this has been up, so the tie rod used to go that way. So what I need to do is put a straight piece of flat stock down there to stick out probably about 4 or 5 inches, and then brace it up so it won't bend, which this go-kart will only be ridden on asphalt. This will absolutely not be ridden on gravel or anything else. So we shouldn't have to worry about bending that unless someone wrecks it, and I really hope that doesn't happen. And once the tie rod links are made and these knuckles are redone, then I can go to the gas pedal setup and the brake. We'll keep going on this thing. It's turning out pretty nice. I got to let this cool off, and I can bolt the steering wheel up. The hub, there's the quick release hub. I think there's going to be a pretty cool little setup on this go-kart. But anyways, once this cools off, I'll get that bolted on, put the steering wheel on, and let you see what it looks like. Okay, so there's the steering wheel all bolted up to the go-kart. I'm not a massive fan of that steering wheel. I had another steering wheel kind of like it, but it wasn't like crazy shaped like this one is. But it'll do for now. I may end up taking that Type R junk out. Like I said, it'll do for now. So that's the steering wheel pretty much straight. I mean, the thing has absolutely no play in it. It's really tight. Most go-karts have sloppy steering, so that's going to be pretty nice. I may actually I was going to put a bearing down there, but this is going to work out nice. I just don't need to leave it out in the rain, and I need to grease those pieces of pipe every chance I can, because it's a real tight fit. That's why it's such a smooth steer, you know, feel. So I definitely don't want that rusting up. But let me know what you think about this steering wheel setup. I mean, I think it's nice how it goes through the floor. And I don't think I got you was able to see it earlier, but there's the steering arm. So now I just got to cut up some old tie rods, which are laying right there. Cut those up, make it the right size. But, well, I guess first I need to mod those knuckles like I need to. So I need to pull both those off and cut those ears off, and then start modding those. Once I get the tie rod done, then the steering will be all complete. And I'm thinking about making a little dashboard for this to hold the tack and the on and off switch. So, and we are going to put some lights on this and a battery. Of course, it won't have a way to charge the battery, so I'll have to trickle charge it whenever I can. And these have drifter sleeves. I know I need to pull them off. I bought these tires and wheels used. These are the skinnier of the four. Of course, the fronts are, and he used them on a trike, so he had, you know, both sets he would swap out and had drifter tubes on them. I had taken the ones off the rear, or no, I didn't get none with the rear, and I'm going to remove these. So, okay, so I got those new knuckles built. You can see all I did was weld a piece of square tubing and made it so they can get quite a bit of angle. And I drilled a hole. That's what that bolt is in there for. And then, of course, that'll hook to the tie rod. And the tie rod will hook to that flat piece of steel. Now, I have my tie rod up here in the vise. I have already cut it down, and I'm going to weld this tie rod to this end, and then I'll be able to adjust this, you know, a good inch in or out. So that'll be plenty of adjustability. So now I'm just going to clean this up and tack this on and put a good bead around it, and then I'll have one side tie rod done, and then I'll go dig around in my tie rods, find another piece cut, and then the front end will be 100%. Okay, to give you a little bit better look at these knuckles I'm making, used to have that weird bent piece of metal that's actually laying right there, that red piece. So what I did was cut it off and grinded it smooth. It was located down there. Then I took this square tube, and this is 4.5 inches, and I'll drill a hole in the end of it here in a minute. And I welded it on to this knuckle. Now I had a hole right here, of course. So what I did was found a little tiny piece of scrap metal laying on the floor. You know, as you can see, I got a bunch of little random pieces of metal. So it looked just like that piece right there, that little triangle shaped piece. And I just stuck it right in there. Actually, you can see the corner sticking up right there. But stuck it down in there and then did some welds around it. And there she is. Should definitely be strong enough. I mean, it's welded all the way around really well. So you can see there. There is a tiny little hole right there. I need to put a little bead in, but she's definitely strong. Stronger than what it was before. Now, like I said, I will drill my hole in the end of this to hook the tie rod link, kind of like I did that one right there. And then once it cools off, bolt it all up, and then I can cut the other tie rod in size. And then the front steering setup is completely done. I wasn't really paying attention when I welded this brake on, but you can see that I left a big piece of metal sticking up. I'm going to cut that down to size. I'm going to pull this. I use this engine, by the way, just for mocking up. This is like an old Predator engine. Well, it's not a Predator, actually. Some off-brand Harbor Freight engine. But I'm going to trim that down so it looks a lot better than what it does, and do a couple welds, you know, on the underneath side of it to make sure it's really strong. And I can pull this brake caliper off at any time, by the way. I can access the screws, the bolts right there, and then there's one on down in there that you can't see. Okay, we got the whole front end all buttoned up. We got those hubs on, or those knuckles we made, and then got the steering all bolted up with I put the washers in there to keep them separated enough. I just need to adjust the alignment once the tires are on, but first I got to take these drifter tubes sleeves off of these tires, and that's probably going to be a pickle. I've never pulled them off before, so that might be a pain. So we'll get to that next, pulling those sleeves off, and once the front tires are on and alignment set, we're going to install that spooler right there that's upside down. So let's get these tubes off, or these sleeves. I keep on calling them tubes for some reason. And we'll get them thrown on the front of this. Okay, so I know people's going to hate me for this, but this is the way I'm going to remove these drift sleeves. I bought these tires from an individual off Craigslist, and it already had these sleeves on it. Now these are the front tires because these are the 6-inch wide ones. The rear ones are 8-inch wide, and they didn't have the sleeves on them. These did. So instead of going through the hassle of trying to get these things off, I just put a pry bar up under, so when my cutting disc goes through, it'll hit the metal instead of hitting the tire, of course. And I'm just going to take my angle grinder and I'm going to cut right down through here and separate it. Like I said, I know people's going to hate me for it, but I can buy sleeves later instead of working with these things for hours trying to get them off. So let's cut these sleeves off. Now I can pretty much separate it and not have to go through the hassle of trying to take these things off manually. Because these things can be a pain to take off. And there we go. We got those sleeves off. Okay, we got the test motor sitting on there, and you can see how she's going to look. I think it looks pretty sweet. Let me get back a little bit so you can get a real shot of her. I like it quite a bit. I don't like how the tube is real thin walled, of course. I've done mentioned that. What I'm going to do is get measurements off this go-kart and actually have someone bend me up this pipe exactly the same so I can build this thing, the exact same replica of this at a later date, just with a stiffer frame. I think it'll do just perfectly fine though. Like I said, it's a street go-kart. Anyways, it won't see gravels. But the brakes mount, I just got to trim the mount that I made Wasn't paying attention. It was late the night that I welded that on, or I'd have trimmed that excess off. But we'll get that next. And I got to mount that brake. It's just standing up right there. And also the gas, I'm going to switch it to a cable instead of that rod setup. But yeah, so we're getting there. So let's get that brake mounted up. And we also got to mount the master cylinder for the brake, as you can see laying on the ground right there. And then we can go to, I'm just going to bolt that seat on it for right now, because I got a fiberglass seat we're going to have to widen. But then we can put the engine that's going on it, we can mount it and get the sprocket and everything mounted.